Hello, class. Thank you for joining me for my presentation. My name is Rashid Roshan. Today I'm going to discuss the interview that I conducted with Taylor G. I'll get right to it. Taylor G is a 42-year-old Jewish male. He was born and raised by an Orthodox Jewish family, his own. Um, he grew up very religious, the whole family. Religion was a very big part of their life, although since the age of about 19, he denounced Judaism to his family. And he no longer practices that or any form of religion. However, he has become more spiritual as a result of this, and in addition to the other life circumstances he has experienced. Um, he has he was a client at an inpatient recovery center for about 4 months. Um, Taylor G is the pseudonym I will be using to refer to him. And Taylor is an alcoholic. Taylor has been a heavy drinker. He notes since his early 20s, and he has maintained about 11 months of sobriety up to this point. I really chose Taylor G for this interview because he strikes me as a profoundly spiritual person, and he has a unique perspective growing up in a supremely religious family, and then now moving on to his next phase in life, where not only is he putting behind any kind of substance use, he's starting to grow more as a spiritual person and identifies a growth in spirituality. And but importantly, it does not necessarily make him or anyone religious just because they are spiritual. So I really appreciated the interview that I gave him, and the answers that he had provided were very thought provoking. Uh, Taylor does feel that you can be religious and spiritual, but you don't necessarily one doesn't mean you are the other, right? You don't being religious doesn't mean you're also spiritual, and being spiritual doesn't mean you are by default religious. Um, and what I found is there is a difference. Per this text in Mahoney and Cano was that religion is more of a social thing, whereas or seen as a social thing, right? People will go to churches, going to the mosque or the temple is a public. It's sort of a social engagement, whereas spirituality is more likely to be practiced behind closed doors. It really can be and is more seen as more private. Um, and although America in this country, we are seeing a little less religion and a little more spirituality. However, many more people identify with a religion than those that do not. So I included this slide about apostasy because and spirituality. Taylor, being a Jewish apostate, he again left the religion, but still maintained close ties with his family, who remained very deeply religious in their practices as Orthodox Jewish people. Um, but there was not really any animosity or any kind of chasm between him and his family after he had announced that he was no longer Jewish. Um, and it brings up a lot of interesting things, because families, the answers he provided were pretty consistent with the findings we have in our textbooks. For example, Spirituality Within Religious Traditions and Social Work Practice by Mary Van Hook. There was a chapter that they were talking about how there is that very strong sense of a community in Jewish culture, um, because there is an importance in family and in the rituals that families do. They associated spiritual religious holidays with the family. It's linked to these relationships. That's why Taylor still celebrates these Jewish holidays with his families. He does. He always goes to these get-togethers. He really seems to identify culturally with this religious upbringing that he had. And In addition, one of the other things that kind of was repeated in our text, in the same text by Von Hook, is there is a notion of forgiveness in the Jewish tradition. Um, the I believe is Maimonides' notion is that God is forgiveness. Um, Even the celebration of Yom Kippur, the process requires a Jewish person to ask for forgiveness. So that seems to be the theme in his life and his family is There really is an acceptance and a sort of uh, for who he is and the life path that he has chosen. They have chosen to stay by his side with the change in religious beliefs and with the behaviors associated with his alcoholism, as he is the only person in his family that identifies as an alcoholic as well. And it's more consistent with our text is Taylor and I did discuss a little bit about the benefits of being spiritual. He looks at it that he did not really begin drugs or alcohol use until his until about 19 to 20 years old. And it was, he notes that a lot of it was because he was so deeply involved in the his religious community that he had no desire really to engage in a lot of delinquent activities that juveniles might. And per these studies, and adolescents are much less likely to use drugs and alcohol as a coping skill if there is adequate religious upbringing in the household. These are some of the questions that I had asked him in the interview. I'll go to the next slide since each question is on each slide. I'll begin with Taylor's definition of spirituality. He believes spirituality is obviously a complicated subject growing up. Um, he found that it really is within a person. It's a gut feeling, and it's but he does find it gratification looking for meaning as opposed to happiness. This is actually very consistent with logotherapy, as noted by Viktor Frankl in the book Man's Search for Meaning that we have been reading. And that's actually a key element in logotherapy. And he also noted, Taylor, in the interview, that spirituality is just so different from each person. That's why he had difficulty defining it. It really was not really an explanation he could find by a book, and but these answers they're not necessarily the same for each person. So that seemed to be one of his key takeaways of one is a profound difference between spirituality and a religion, although he views them both very similar as both require a level of faith. Um, I asked Taylor how he expresses his own spiritual nature and if he's better off expressing it. He believes life certainly sends him a lot of signals. Taylor moved from New York to California to maintain a level of sobriety. He finds that a lot of what he's looking for in life is in Los Angeles. Um, the relocation seems to have fed his spiritual soul in a way that New York City did not. And he finds that when he does get these gut feelings, he did use that term a lot in the interview, the gut feeling of knowing when something is right. He tends to try to listen to his gut, and that's one of the that seems to be one of the uh, positive things he's gaining out of sobriety, which I will further expand on is specifically his sobriety in a slide coming up. I did discuss the topic of romance and how he has navigated through romantic partners with differences in spiritual and religious beliefs. He talked specifically about his ex-wives. One is a practicing Jewish woman; she was an Orthodox Jew, and the other was a practicing Catholic woman. However, he navigated through that with a sense of acceptance. Taylor did not find the differences in his beliefs. He was actually atheist and in both marriages. He did not find the differences to be threatening or compromising to the marriage. Although both marriages did end in divorce, Taylor notes that it was certainly not due to differences in spiritual beliefs. And Taylor, again, there's a big theme of acceptance, pretty consistent with the findings in in the studies of the Jewish religion, and there seems to be a lot of acceptance that he was brought up with from his family, possibly accepting him, and then him turning around and accepting the differences he's had with people very dear to him, like his wife at the time. But yeah, certainly, he mentioned he was never forced or asked to go to church or with his wife or the temple, things like that. So certainly not too much dysfunction on that end. Um, I asked him how he could teach someone to become spiritual, or if that was possible. And Taylor talked about how it's really not good to teach. teach or basically just throw your religion or spiritual beliefs onto people. They should be coming to you instead. He found that coercion is very, it happens often in a lot of religions, and it really starts when they're young. I noted that it is pretty consistent with the Jewish religion, as boys are, traditionally they are circumcised very quickly. It's within a week or 8 days after their birth. Obviously, it's not the choice of the child, but that kind of served as an example of uh, Taylor felt that there's a lot of coercion and that kind of poisons religion in a way. Taylor, his personal beliefs are the coercion signals a lack of faith, and that if someone needs to make someone else believe that what they're believing, then that person's faith probably is not strong to begin with. Taylor said if you wanted to share spirituality with someone, they will come to you for questions. So again, no coercion whatsoever in his spiritual, if he was teaching it. He has a pretty positive view of people having families with strong spiritual backgrounds. Again, he grew up with a very strong spiritual family. However, he would uh, raise a family. He wouldn't necessarily raise a family with spiritual beliefs, but he certainly would share it with them and then offer them the choice. Saying, I think he mentioned specifically, he would tell them spirituality is something he believes in, and it's not uh, set in stone, and it's not a fact. It's not objective. It's rather subjective. But he does see that families can bond through spiritual and religious experiences. Um, and again, him certainly raising a family with it. Again, he sees himself incorporating things like Jewish holidays into the family. Um, However, it would certainly not be forced or an expectation for the hypothetical children, which he does not have. So spirituality, asked him about how it is in today's, climate. How what is this is a buzzword now? How does he feel when he hears the word spirituality? And he's pretty passionate about it not being commercialized. He feels that it's such an important, thing in people's lives because it provides such a, you know, profound element of meaning, which is something he holds dearly in value. He also talked about California being much different than New York. His experience in California has been that spiritual is a more private, not only more private, but it's a lot less religious means of spiritual, as means of feeding the soul. Whereas in New York, spiritual expression was usually more through religion. Spirituality and sobriety. So again, I just asked, I pumped this question about how different he has been since becoming sober and how his spiritual behavior has been. He sees spirituality as being a tremendous lifesaver. He is someone who does practice a lot of mindful meditation. Um, he does not adhere to like a 12-step program like Alcoholics Anonymous. He admitted he feels a little too prideful to join that, but he does see his spiritual soul needs to be fed in order to maintain a level of sobriety. And I put it low, and that's pretty consistent with the literature here that talks about how having a strong sense of spiritual direction can reduce instances of like a negative emotional state. Self-actualization, very healthy for the soul. And Taylor's very pleased with his sobriety and sees that maintaining a spiritual component to his sobriety is key for his success. There are practical implications. I mean, overall, I list them here: the micro, meso, and macro things to consider as social workers. Yeah, knowledge is certainly power, and that rings true in this case. We can help out so many more of our current and future clients by knowing their culture, knowing their spiritual practices, and how they can be implemented, how they can help uh, promote, just add more value into their treatment and to better suit their lifestyle needs. And as far as my growth as a social work, as far as this, Jewish heritage encourages people to utilize their feelings in an intellectual manner to increase their understanding. Now, I put that there because this is something that I must know as a social worker. Again, this helps in the micro and meso interaction. If I'm with a Jewish community, I know how I can best serve them and leave things. It was in the textbook of Von Hook how a Jewish person you is never taught to answer a question directly, but sometimes they might be better taught to understand things through study. Um, That's about all the time I have. Thank you.